The barista laughed when Tasha ordered a black coffee, unaware that she was the CEO of a massive company. His mockery became the beginning of a scandal that rocked the city. What happened next shocked everyone. But let's start from the very beginning. Tasha was standing in line at a local coffee shop, thinking about her upcoming meeting with investors. She was the CEO of a successful tech company, but despite her accomplishments, she often felt the weight of being underestimated. Today was one of those days. As she approached the counter, a young barista, Jake, around 20, in an untidy uniform, looked at her with slight condescension. Like many others, he probably didn't see anything special in her. Just another black woman in an expensive suit. Her appearance didn't seem to change his approach to customers. He didn't know he was standing in front of one of the most influential figures in business. Tasha ordered her usual coffee. A black one, no sugar. Simple, or so she thought, and universal. Jake, noticing her choice, smirked. "Probably just right for you. Not too extravagant for a lady like you," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. He clearly saw her as nothing more than a woman who didn't know what she really needed. Tasha felt his words sting, but she remained calm. She was used to such comments, though they always left a bitter aftertaste. His tone carried not only judgment, but also a biased attitude, as if her choice of coffee was too simple for a woman of her status. A typical black woman wouldn't allow herself to be so refined without at least adding caramel syrup. She nodded politely, her expression cold but barely perceptible. "Yes, just black. Thank you." As he prepared the coffee, she noticed his hands trembling slightly, possibly from nervousness, or more likely from lack of experience or confidence. Tasha smiled to herself, understanding that her words wouldn't change the attitude of this young man. She chose not to engage in an open confrontation. Her goal wasn't to humiliate him. She was above that. When Jake finally handed her the cup, his voice sounded again, this time with a hint of mockery he couldn't hide. "Here's your simple coffee. I didn't think someone like you would want something so boring." There was more in his words than just a joke. It was an unconscious belittling of her choice, her taste, her status. Tasha took the cup and left a generous tip. $5, much more than usual. She knew the tip wasn't just a thank you for the coffee. It was her way of showing that the world wasn't made up solely of those who judge others based on appearances. She'd been through too many such situations in her life. Tasha was sitting in her car when she noticed her phone vibrating again. She didn't pick it up right away, as she had an important call with business partners, but soon glanced at the screen. Her eyes paused briefly on the name of a company that had recently signed a contract with her. The project was worth millions and promised to change a lot in the tech world. Scrolling through a few messages, she noticed that many people on social media had started mentioning her name. Someone had shared her post from earlier that morning. Suddenly, something caught her attention. Among all the posts about her business, one after another, there were mentions of the coffee shop where she had just made her order. Her followers, aware of the situation, began to comment, expressing both support and outrage over how she had been treated. She was a little surprised, but decided not to read further. Looking up, she noticed a group of employees standing at the entrance to her office. Among them were a few familiar faces. One of them, Liam, was her right-hand man and assistant. He approached her with a smile, but her expression didn't suggest good news. "Tasha, have you seen the news?" Liam was beside her, his eyes betraying his concern. "What happened?" Tasha's heart skipped a beat and her anxiety immediately heightened. Liam handed her his phone and she saw a screenshot from a local news outlet. CEO of a successful company faces racial discrimination at a coffee shop. Tasha was stunned. No one knew she had ordered coffee at that particular cafe, but now the incident had gone viral. "They didn't even know who you were?" Liam quietly asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Tasha, this guy has no idea who he's dealing with." Tasha didn't respond. She looked at the phone screen again, reading the comments, jokes, and memes that were starting to circulate. There was something painful, ironic, yet powerful in them. An insult wrapped in public outrage. It was revenge, but not born of malice. Only brutal truth. In her mind, everything became clear. All those years, when she had been under the pressure of public opinion and stereotypes, she had endured far worse and more direct attacks. But now this seemed like a new level of humiliation. And the strangest part, she had done nothing. She hadn't answered him. She hadn't even known anyone would pay attention to her. Tasha closed the phone and returned to her office. She realized she could no longer ignore these moments. Something inside her had shifted. She was beginning to understand that she couldn't just remain a silent observer, especially when the situation concerned her directly. As she entered her office, a press release was already waiting for her. One of her lawyers had suggested how best to approach the situation. But Tasha thought for a moment. Then, as if receiving an answer to her internal question, she walked over to her computer and typed her first post. Today, at the coffee shop, I was treated like a second-class citizen. My order was ridiculed, and I was the target of racism. I've always strived for success, but moments like these remind me why standing up for the truth is so important. After posting, she noticed how her followers started reacting. But it wasn't just them. Within minutes, she received a message from one of her colleagues, saying that protests were already being planned at that cafe. Tasha knew her actions would have consequences, but she hadn't expected them to come so quickly. She turned and walked to the door, but before opening it, she cast a final glance at Jake, who now stood frozen in indecision, as if he couldn't figure out how to respond to her silent goodbye. Outside, she took a deep breath, feeling the pressure slowly ease. She wasn't angry, just disappointed. But despite everything she'd been through, she remained calm. That was her strength. As she had expected, she wasn't understood. But this was just the beginning. Tasha returned to the office, absorbed in the new messages. Her post about racism at the coffee shop had gone viral, and support poured in from all sides. But this was just the first step. Soon, she received a message from the coffee shop. The manager, Mark, wanted to meet. She headed there, feeling that this conversation would change a lot. At the cafe, she was met by Mark and several managers, while Jake stood in the corner, clearly nervous. Mark apologized, trying to explain that Jake was just an inexperienced guy. But Tasha was resolute. "This isn't just a mistake, it's a systemic issue," she said, looking at Jake. "This insult is not just against me, but everyone who faces this every day." She turned to the barista. He stood there, unsure of what to say. Tasha continued, "I don't want him to lose his job, but he needs to understand what it means to be vulnerable. And you all need to realize that these things don't go unnoticed." With that, she turned and walked out, knowing that her actions had only begun to change the situation. The next day, Tasha woke up and dove back into the flood of news. Videos from the coffee shop continued to gain popularity. The comments grew even more intense, and the media began to take a serious interest in her story. But none of this was the ultimate goal. Tasha knew that real change required more than just public exposure. She was scrolling through the news when she received a message from Liam. It said that Jake had sent her a personal message on social media to apologize. "I didn't know who you were. I'm ashamed of how I behaved. I understand I made a mistake, and I'm ready to learn." Tasha, without hesitation, replied, "Apologies are important, but they're not enough. I'd like you to understand why this is so painful. Learn to recognize your privilege and your mistakes." Jake responded immediately, promising to reflect on himself and to be of more use than just offering regrets. Tasha understood. His realization was the beginning of change. A few days later, she learned that Jake had signed up for a diversity and inclusion course, organized by the coffee shop. It was a small but significant victory. Throughout all this, support on social media never stopped. When the cafe announced they would work on improving their service culture and training for employees, public opinion shifted dramatically. The whole incident became a turning point for many who hadn't yet realized how crucial these moments were for real change. When Tasha returned to the cafe a week later, she ordered her usual coffee. Jake, now with a slight wariness in his eyes, handed her the cup with a sincere smile. "Thank you for giving me a chance," he said, and Tasha nodded in response. She knew that this small step was just the beginning, but change was already underway.